Office of Planning and Research. Well, and I would probably say that the perfect storm, I don't know if it's going to be created. It's pretty much there, I think, if you look at that, with the stats that you just laid out and poverty rates. I think, we actually did bring up emergency inhalers and as an adaptation mechanism, not as a solution, but as a necessary component of addressing the acute impacts of climate change is key. Much stronger efforts, I think, to address the air quality, and stronger efforts. I mean, we just saw a significant battle in the legislature 2 weeks ago, and so that conversation is changing, but we are, we need to, as a state, take a very strong stand against those contaminants and those pollutants.
Yeah, I'm not reducing the desirability of mitigation. I'm saying we want to do that, but I still have to deal with that. There's still even if we cut Madeira in half, it's still 50% higher than everybody else. And those are emergency room visits. That's not just I have an asthma problem or a chronic asthma problem. That's I'm in the emergency room.
Well, and there is an issue in terms of access to medical care. So we do have a deficit in medical care and primary medical care here in the Valley as well. So we do need to make investments. I don't know if that's necessarily OPR or DHS but improved primary care and access to primary care through the schools, through families, through health homes. That I think is also another component, making sure there's access, which we're working on as a state, but making sure that we have access for everybody impacted to preventative health care and education around how to address asthma before going to the emergency room. And more education on, unfortunately, when it's okay to go outside, which is, I think, as a kid who grew up playing outside a lot, it's disheartening to know that we need to create better recreational opportunities that don't necessitate exposure to the contamination.
How might that greater communication look like in impacted communities? We can tweet people, we can put things on the internet, we can have things on TV, but I realize that the most impacted communities don't have that access to information. So we've got a commitment with cap and trade funds that we're supposed to be spending 25% of them in the impacted communities, right? And there's a commitment, and now some people would say just do it, reduce the pollutants on the heavy trucks, and you don't have to tell anybody, just do it, just get it done. But we're finding the best policies are open communication, so people are understanding how they can not go outside. What does that mean when the pollution is bad, or there's a forest fire, or other urban forestry? Don't cut down your tree, for God's sakes. And if you're anywhere in the Valley, right? We need that to sequester their carbon. Do you have any suggestions or thoughts?
Sure. We, as a co-director of a not-for-profit organization, we have probably a not unbiased view that the fifth house, or that the nonprofit and service community does an excellent job of reaching the most vulnerable communities, and that we've been able through SEP, supplemental environmental projects, and other resources provided by the state through polluter fees, through et cetera, to reach the most vulnerable communities in issues related to air and water quality. And those have been very successful. Through cap and trade, we've just recently, through a pilot program, there's going to be technical assistance for the Affordable Housing and Sustainable Communities program, which we're just beginning development of in partnership with the Strategic Growth Council. We're hoping that is a very proactive and aggressive outreach mechanism around at least land use, housing, and transportation, and how those efforts can address climate change through both mitigation and adaptation. But we would really love to incorporate that technical assistance throughout the cap and trade program as a means of improving education and multiplying the effect of the investments.
Okay. Thank you. Thanks to both of you. Now I'll ask the sergeants or somebody to move a microphone there. This is, we've heard from the speakers, and now it's time to open up this hearing to the public. And I want to thank all the speakers for sharing your expertise and knowledge there. So if there are members of the public that like to address it, this is an official state Senate Environmental Quality Committee. We take notes and we go back, and this will be part of our report to the other members. So if anybody would like to address us, please come forward. I'd ask that you give your name and some sort of reference, either the farm you're from or the town you're from, and then please go ahead.
Good afternoon, Senator. John Larea with the California League of Food Processors. Thank you for coming to the Valley, by the way. We really do appreciate you being down here, because the focus is actually, we're the petri dish for all of this. We have all of the climate change issues that are currently being debated up at the legislature within CARB exist within the Valley here. One of the things I'd like to point out is that the food processors, if you look on your CalEnviro screens, most of our members as industrial food processors are located within the high-risk areas also. And we are the most highly efficient companies that you'll probably find in the food processing industry. And we also supply most of the jobs for those small communities out there. And these are good jobs. These are not, these are jobs that they've been there for 5 to 30 years. These are some of them are union, some are not, a lot of good benefits, so we want to maintain that. But what we're finding, and like Tom Jordan mentioned, adaptive management, where we're diverting funds into a cap and trade program that could be used to make us more efficient, clean up even more around there, or even clean up our communities, because those communities are vital to us in order to be able to maintain our essentially lead role in being able to produce food here in the Valley and for the world. One of the things that you'll notice is that in the cap and trade funds, we have the 535s that are going there. 535 directs the money there, yet there's no money coming from us as industry, as part of the cap and trade, that's being directed back to us to help us to reduce our emissions. And it really makes no sense where percentages of the money is being divided up and sent out to all these areas, and yet the very ones that you're accusing of being the worst operators, the money's not coming back to them. There's no specific mechanism within the budget to direct it back to those. And I would even say that there should be some type of criteria associated with it. If you have a food processor or some other industrial that's located within a high-risk area as identified by the CalEnviro screen, I think that's exactly where that money needs to go. I've pointed out to CARB before that if we were to get $3 or $4 million to replace a boiler to make it 10% more efficient, would that meet the 535 criteria if we're located within a low-income community or a disadvantaged community? And they had no answer. And there is no agency out there that is specifically tuned to the facilities that are subject to the cap and trade itself. So that's one consideration. The other is, I want you to know that we do support what the Air District is doing. We have for a long time. We're trying to work with them. And one of the things that we're finding to be difficult right now is that the state seems reluctant to try to come together and set up a plan so that everybody can participate and figure out exactly what we're trying to do here, how it affects each other, what the interactions are. It's still a kind of a piecemeal thing where you've got energy moving in one direction, you've got water moving in another, you've got air moving in another, then you've got the Air District dealing with issues that are coming down both from the federal government in terms of the criteria pollutants and the clean air, and also the CARB. What we'd like to see is if we can't do a state one, maybe we're going to have to look at regional. Compact it down. Make sure that within those areas, if you're going to use cap and trade money, we can identify the issues there and how they interact. And one of the things that we're supporting here in terms of the use of the cap and trade money, especially coming through 535, is that you identify someone like the Air District as the lead for the area itself. One of the things we don't want to see is we have a lot of small communities. I mean, literally tiny ones, 500, 1,500 people, 1,800 people that we work with. And what we don't want to see is activists coming in and proposing a bunch of different projects to these cities that really don't have the ability to be able to either know how to get to the state to get the money to help them. Whereas if we had a central location where these cities could come to somebody like the Air District, which runs the region, essentially, and say, here's the projects that people are proposing for us, which ones are good, and they could actually even say, you know what, here's the projects we've identified that we really want to see put into place. Because if we get 5 or 6 cities doing this, we can help not only on our criteria pollutants, but we can also help, stay within the confines of the 535 requirements and still reduce GHG emissions. So there's a lot still that needs to be done to coordinate this particular effort. And I can tell you what Tom said about adaptive management is true. Our members, because they're seasonal, they run 90 to 110 days out of the year. In fact, these are probably the last 2 weeks of their season, and then they're going to shut down. They'll be down until next June or July when they start back up. When money is diverted away from them and into the cap and trade to buy allowances to continue producing at the current level they're producing at, there's a lot of little things they could do to make themselves more efficient that don't get done. So instead of doing it every 2 years, they do it every 5 years, or they do it every 10 years, because they have to work it into a budget that way. So that's one of the last thing, and I'll make it quick, is just simply leakage risk. Leakage risk, if you understand what the cap and trade is, leakage risk is when an industry or a facility within the cap and trade is trade exposed, so that the added money associated with the carbon adder and having to buy the allowances make them uncompetitive. So they pick up their business and they move out of state. So they leak their emissions out of state because they want to continue producing at that same cost so they can stay competitive. Leakage risk for somebody like food processors, it punishes us. We can't leave. We are part and parcel with all of the agricultural efforts here in the valley. Without us, they could not produce the tons of food that they do produce, because we're the ones who can it and store it. We do 12 million tons of tomatoes per year. And there would be significantly less if they had to truck those, because you can't, because of time considerations and cost considerations. So what we'd like to do and food processors are going to lose 25% of their allowances starting in the 3rd compliance period, which starts in 2018. So that means even more costs are going to go into this program and not come back to us to help us either maintain our productions or to be able to compete. And so what's going to happen is that those communities are going to suffer even more. And that money, it can be directed back in through various activities and programs associated with 535. But it'll also mean the loss of jobs. It'll mean reduced production, and it'll mean no expansions associated with some of the facilities out there, which could create even more economic benefit for the valley. So thank you.
Well, thank you. Next.
Good afternoon. It's a great opportunity to be here today. My name is Rosie Burrows. I'm an organic farmer here in the county of Merced. I also have been pleased to have been asked to sit on the advisory board of the California Climate and Agricultural Network, called CalCan. And in July of 2015, CalCan, along with UC Davis and the California Food and Ag Department, with the California Almond Board and California Pistachios, put out this paper on carbon footprint and 5 things that California orchard crops could do for best practices. And of the top 3 practices, most farmers are doing 2 of the top 3 things. We talked about it today on the chip waste in the orchards, which is using the tree prunings and chipping them and putting them back either on the soil for ground cover and/or for biomass. And the second one is energy efficiency with drip or micro irrigation. But the third one, which I think is the most important, is about reducing the synthetic nitrogen fertilizer in management techniques. And as an organic farmer, the one thing that we learned is that all life starts in the soil. And when you're using synthetic fertilizer and killing the soil, you are also disrupting the ability for carbon sequestering. So it's very, very important. It was referred to Louise Jackson earlier on some of her research that she said that if you put just a half-inch of compost on pasture, that you can improve the carbon sequestering in the soil. Agriculture is the #1 tool that we can use for climate change, but the educational resources need to be available to the growers. So it was very informative today to hear all the different agencies talk, but I would like to say that in terms of moving forward, it's very important that that the incentives and these fun practices that are going to address both issues, both in reducing greenhouse gases and increasing the resilience to the climate impacts. And the primary goal in all of these efforts needs to be to the outreach to the grower. We are the stewards of the land, and we can make the change happen. Biological-based approaches to soil management and water stewardship, both of these are important for addressing both for mitigation and adaptation. In talking about the research, the adaptation research should specifically incorporate also organic farming systems, because we're looking at a whole system, not just part of one. And back to the outreach to the ag community is crucial. And we're very pleased on your SB 246 that places agriculture. We feel it's very important to have an agricultural representative on the Adaptation Advisory Panel. In terms of some of the comments today, I wanted to say, as an almond farmer, they talked a little bit about the climate change in terms of temperature and the coldness and how that would affect cherries. Well, we have the major production of almonds in the Central Valley. And if our climate change changes that cold period, that will impact our major #1 crop of almonds. So we'd like to also have you consider that the increased threat of farmland conservation that is posed by climate change, because as farmers lose their ability to stay on the land and steward the land, then that land then gets back into urban development, which causes more, an increase for more greenhouse gas emissions. We were talking also about schools and our less fortunate people that have trouble in areas of poverty. Please consider pesticide use near schools, and not only in terms of health, but air quality. We need to encourage more trees that are planted at our schools for cooling, and encourage more all the way around, including starting here at UC Merced, composting trash. So those were some of the things that I thought were important to share with you as a farmer. We look forward to working in building the best practices possible, and I was very impressed with today's hearing to hear all the expertise witnesses, and look forward as a farmer to working together in solutions. Last week we drove through the mountains, and the beetle damage and seeing all the millions of trees that are destroyed and they haven't burned yet, it's catastrophic, and it's going to be a huge disaster. Thank you.
Thank you. Next.
Buenas tardes. Mi nombre es Isabel Solorio y vengo de la comunidad de Lanier en el condado de Fresno.
My name is Isabel Solorio, and I come from Lanier in
Condado de Fresno.
Fresno County.
Es importante que haga fondos para distribuir en diferentes comunidades como la mía.
It is very important that we count with funds to be distributed in communities like mine.
Contamos con un centro en la comunidad, pero el problema es que no tiene aire acondicionado ni swan coolers.
We count with one cooling center in our community. The problem is like we don't have air conditioner or coolers on it.
También necesitamos contar con más espacios verdes,
We need to have more green areas,
como parques, y tenerlos y mantenerlos en nuestra comunidad.
like parks, and a way to maintain them in our community.
Tenemos el parque, pero no podemos usarlo porque está muy seco, no hay pasto.
We have one park, but we cannot use it because it's very dry. We don't have grass on it.
So, es otro problema más serio porque los niños están cogiendo asma y alergia.
And that is a very serious problem because the kids are getting asthma and allergies.
También necesitamos hacer más estudios sobre asma y alergia en personas que trabajan en el campo, cuáles son los efectos secundarios.
We need to do some more research in regards asthma with the farm workers and which are the second effects for them.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Francisco Mendez. I'm coming from southwest of Fresno, and city of Fresno. I am one of the low-income families that got a house from Habitat for Humanity, and I'm very happy of that. We have a lot of problems I see in Fresno, and I hope these problems are over California. It's about water. You know, we are buying the water from the city. There's one bill. Plus, we had to buy water bottle in the stores. I hope that, like, I'm talking to my neighbors, and we are waiting to have, like, some kind of coupons by mail, or go to the stores to cash water, to buy water with those coupons or tokens. Otherwise, will be more expensive, or we can have filters for every house to put under the sink, so we don't have two bills. At least we can have one bill. The other thing, like Isabel says, we need more parks all over California, more green parks. I see that we have some small parks that are not used. Nobody uses them. Nobody care about them. And even if we want to go there, there is no sidewalk, no crosswalk, no bike walk. There is nothing. We need to put more money in those parks, and the parks we have are far away from our houses. We cannot take our kids to go to play. They have asthma. The teachers told us, take the family outside. But outside where? The air quality is very bad. To kill the bad air quality, we need clean services in transportation. The transportation is very bad, very old, is not updated. We need green buses. That's help a lot if we have green buses. I have a lot of neighbors who are retired, older people, and they say there is too far away from their houses to go to cooling centers. Mm-hmm. Also, the kids, they don't have place to go outside and do a homework. Have a park will be a good idea, close to a cooling center for them, and then we can have volunteers to help those kids to make a homework. Well, we need buses, the parks, water filters, and the most important thing, I know that some of my neighbors send their kids to school, and some of the kids are playing outside when it's very hot outside. We don't have any way to know how is the air quality outside. And we need, all the school districts to have how to measure the air quality for the teachers and the parents. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. Thank you very much for being here. My name is Leticia Corona, policy advocate with Leadership Council for Justice and Accountability. I'm now going to repeat some of the great efforts and priorities identified by some of the community residents that we work with in some of the disadvantaged communities throughout the San Joaquin, or what our co-director as well, Phoebe Seatons, had said, but just working on the ground on trying to implement some of these projects. We work very closely. I'll start with the CAL FIRE for urban forestry projects and securing funding allocations for disadvantaged communities, for example, park spaces. Just as Francisco had mentioned, he's one of the community residents that we're working very closely in Southwest that's overburdened by industries and a lack of disparities with green spaces, access to parks. What we've seen, as we all know, with the approval of GGRF funds with $2.2 billion, and as Mr. Senator, with the 25% allocation toward disadvantaged communities, we've seen a constant struggle in ensuring that we have the technical assistance on the ground in most of these disadvantaged unincorporated communities that we work with, as well as smaller cities. We've seen the lack of just the capacity and the technical assistance or staff to even put together a 30 to 40 page application and measuring for the next 4 years the carbon sequestration for the reduction of greenhouse gases over a period of year after you have received the fund. We've also seen just the lack of unwillingness of some of our elected officials to be applying for these funds because it is a very tedious process. So just kind of wanted to lay out some of the obstacles that we face in securing these funds here in our region, San Joaquin, as well as in ensuring that we're prioritizing these projects in disadvantaged communities, as we've seen a lack of trees as well as green spaces, as we know that will help reduce greenhouse gases emissions. So we'll continue to work very closely with our local CAL FIRE agent representative for our region in making sure that we at least could get a really good, comprehensive and strong application for Fresno City, or at least the regions that we work with. I know that Farmersville has been the model project last year's cycle. We have been participating as well in the comment periods as well for the GGRF on updating the guidelines. Also just ensuring that we do have proper mechanisms of measuring the air quality around the schools that throughout not just Fresno City, but also around the county areas. I know, for example, Lanier, it belongs to Riverdale Joint Unified School District, so the communities and the schools in the rural areas also need those services as well and mechanisms, so they make sure that their kids are also growing in a healthy and sustainable community. For last slide, I would also like to just emphasizing making sure that we do have priority in the communities that we work with in terms of quality and water quality services, as well as devices, providing perhaps filters in some of the communities. I know there's been state ground emergency monies. One of the communities that we work in, the Cantua Creek, did receive funding for as well bottled water. But we want to make sure that all other communities as well, because more wells are becoming drier, faster rates. And so I know the money is just becoming slower and reaching our communities at a slower rate. So just making sure that once again, going into these projects, we'll continue to work on the ground with closely identifying these needs and priorities with the communities that we work with, but also ensuring that they're well invested and co-benefited the communities that actually need it the most. Thank you very much once again for being here. It's very critical.
Thank you. All right. We'll close the public comment portion of today's hearing. And let me thank everyone for attending. This is our second regional information hearing on climate adaptation. I think this hearing has provided me and the staff with a great overview of the problems that are and the challenges and the needs of the San Joaquin and the Central Valley, and the efforts that are underway on the local level and here at the university. As we look forward to implementing a climate adaptation policy or improving it here in California. We'll be conducting one more regional hearing down in Los Angeles to learn more about the special needs that they have there and the impact that they anticipate that's going to hit the Southern California. What we've heard so far in this hearing and in the other hearings that we have is that California needs more comprehensive approach to climate adaptation, and we need better tools, resources for the local governments, and improved regional coordination. I think there was reference made to a bill that I authored that's on the governor's desk, SB 246, which sets forth in statute the climate adaptation policy to address this transition of information and cooperation with the state, local, and the regional governments. The bill actually puts the Office of Research and Planning in charge to coordinate these adaptation efforts that are occurring throughout the states at the levels of government, and oversees a central source for climate adaptation policy. Obviously, I look forward to the governor signing the bill, but I'm also look forward to these important conversations as we gather information and provide that to the agencies and my colleagues back in the Senate. And with that, I want to thank you, everybody, once again, and our meeting is adjourned.